We've all had those moments, those times where we question our ability, where we're not exactly sure that we can deliver on the promises that we made or things that we said we can do. Imposter syndrome. It's real. Let's talk about it. My name is JMEarley. I help individuals and teams achieve organizational and personal success. And this is Leadership Matters. So today we're talking about imposter syndrome, which simply, in the simplest terms, means when our confidence is shaken, we don't believe in our own abilities and capabilities. When we question whether or not we have the skills necessary or the background or experiences to do the things that others have done. And so I want to talk to you about a time that I had in my career where, although at that time, to be honest, I didn't refer to it as imposter syndrome. I just was like, oh my God, am I a fraud? Will I be able to deliver on the things that I said I would be able to deliver on? Am I the person, the trainer, the instructional designer, the learning and development professional that I profess to be? That was the thought that kind of went through my mind. So I'm just going to share my experiences with you. Hopefully you'll be able to relate and see that at the end of the day, anything that you put your mind to, you will be able to accomplish. You first, however, must believe in yourself. You have to believe that everything in you, everything that's required is already in you. And at the appropriate time, it just will, diamonds are made under pressure, right? And at the appropriate time, under the appropriate amount of pressure, you will produce. You will exceed sometimes even your own expectations. So here's the deal. I was working on a project, and in the project, I was introduced to a new client. It was a new client to the team that I was working on. And it was a new client to me in that I had never worked in this industry before. I didn't know anything about the terminology or jargon. And this client was buying a new software. And the goal for the client was just the software was going to replace a ticketing system that the client was already using. And so I was told I was working on a project and I was already on another project. And so they pulled me off of that project to put me on this one. And this project was working on a tool called ServiceNow. ServiceNow is used as an IT, this particular company was using as, like I said, a ticketing software for and not using it in its full capacity like other companies would use it. But that's neither here nor there. So I digress. Back to what I was saying. So the gist of it is I was called into meetings with the vendor as the vendor explained to the client, how they would be able to use the tool and how it would go from, what they needed today to their tomorrow. I sat in meetings. I didn't know what in the Sam Hill anybody was talking about, not the client that I was working with or the vendor that was working with not my new client. I knew nothing. I promise you, I have described it like as if being in a foreign country and listening to people talk in a foreign language. I had no idea what they were talking about. But I knew if I just took copious notes, eventually things would start to connect. So they had to go live probably at this point, 3 weeks, 3 or 4, I'll say 4 weeks at this point. At 4 weeks, and the client told me, hey, we just really need you to make PowerPoints. They had never worked with a training and development function. They had never had formal training. This client was accustomed to having people sit next to one another, but the team was growing exponentially. So that shadowing was not going to work. They really needed formal training. But because they had never worked with a formal training component before, they were very territorial. They did not want to relinquish any control over their employees or how they did things. We've all, those of you who are already in training development, this is really par for the course. People don't really want to give up control, and they really don't want to do something that they haven't done before. And a lot of organizations are okay with the whole, well, we've got our own trainer, i.e. someone who's well versed in what we do every day, who can have someone sit next to them for the next 3 weeks and can train them. Okay. So in any case, they asked me, well, Jennifer, can you just do 3 PowerPoints? Sure, I can do 3 PowerPoints if that's what you like. My goal was always to be a bridge. I knew it wasn't a holistic solution. I knew it wasn't going to work when I went back to my director and explained what they wanted. But that wasn't my role at that moment. At that moment, I was new to them. At that moment, training was a new function to them. At that moment, I was just there to introduce them to what I could provide once they became open to it. So I go back to my director and I tell her, they want me to do 3 PowerPoints. And she looks at me. I told you I knew it wasn't going to work. She was not a happy camper. And she was like, no, we do all the documentation. That is our job. That's what we do. So when there's iterations and new development in the software, we do all of that. That is our function. And because they are under the auspice of this project now, they have to basically conform. We're all going to have a meeting. So we had a meeting, my director with their director, at every level. Right? It was probably about, the vendor was in the meeting, the directors were in the meeting, the middle managers were in the meeting, the developers were in the meeting, I was in the meeting. And so my director said to her counterpart, now, you can do the training if that's what you want to do, but you will be responsible for all the documentation. At which case, the director was like, oh, no. We're going to let y'all do what y'all do best. We're going to let you handle the documentation. So then he turns to his subordinate and he's like, nah, we're going to let them do it. And so she looks at me across the table and she says, Jennifer, are you okay with that? Sure, I can handle that. That's what I verbally said. Internally, I was thinking, are you freaking kidding me? I got like 3 weeks and 3 days before the go live date. I have nothing, no sandbox to operate the system, no documentation from the vendor, no explanations from the vendor. I don't even know what my client uses this, what they do with the software they're going to replace at this point. I have to literally start from scratch. And that's when the thought crossed my mind. Am I who I say I am? Can I do what I say I can do? At this point, I got 20 years in the game. I wasn't new to this. I didn't start yesterday. I have been developing programs from scratch, from needs analysis to delivery, every part in between, for the last 20 years in banking, in retail, in health. I have everything that I need in me, but it's the pressure of time. So I'm talking to my lead at this point. I'm like, listen, I need X, Y, and Z. And the lead is like, what do you mean you don't have any documentation from the vendor? Blah, blah, blah. We're having meetings, I'm not kidding, like multiple times a day about what I don't have. At some point I say, wait a minute, wait. We can either talk about what I don't have for the next several days and lose time, or you can release me from these meetings that don't benefit me so that I can get whatever I need by any means necessary. That's what I mean. At the end of the day, you have already what you need. And if you don't, you're savvy enough at this point to figure out how to get it. We all have internet access. Even if you have to go to a public library to access it, you can access it. I have said before on this channel and in other videos that I think the most integral skill that I have developed or that I needed, was required of me in my professional capacity as a consultant, has been my ability to do research. I called the company. I said, I need a sandbox. This is who the vendor has sold. This is the company that you're selling service now to. These are the contact people. Let them know. If you have to get if you have to authorize it through them, this is who you need to contact. They already know. I had a sandbox. I started joining forums online to see how other companies use ServiceNow, how the tool was used by other companies. Even though this company was going to use it a little differently, it helped me to understand it. I set up ITT. That's something I learned early on in my career, to spend time out in the trenches. So I wanted to see what the job was. In order for me to be able to write to it, I have to be able to know what it is that you do day to day and how you're going to use this software. That goes back to old school foundational training that I got as an instructional designer early on in my career, that talked this task listing. I've done videos on this channel about a task listing so that you don't use closure, so that you understand exactly what someone does on their job. That has been foundational for me to understand the audience, who I'm designing training for. I facilitated this particular training. I won't be long-winded. I probably will do another video talking about the nooks and crannies of how to do an expedited needs analysis, because a needs analysis is very comprehensive, and if done correctly, takes time. It's not something you can do overnight to produce training in 3 weeks. Let me just say that on go live date, I asked the client, their 3 PowerPoints turned into a 6-hour course. There really needed to be an 8-hour introductory course, which it ultimately became, and it ultimately became a complete curriculum, a multiple day, multiple course curriculum that they thought they could do in 3 hours with 3 PowerPoints. They were so impressed. They had never had formal training. Sometimes you have to, and again, this is probably something, I'll just drop the T's here, something for another video. Sometimes you have to show a client what's possible. Sometimes you have to give them grace and let them come along. Sometimes you can't just go in guns a-blazing. Although I am very good and I am firm about the standards that I set, because I will not design a Band-Aid with my name on it. Something I know that's not going to help ultimately reach the goal, something that I think is going to add more confusion, that's going to leave employees hanging, dangling, disengaged, and disgruntled. I'm not going to do that. And I have said to managers in the past, this is what I require in order to be able to develop a program that's going to be successful. And let me tell you why. The WIFM, the what's in it for me. I tell what's in it for their employees, what's in it for them as a manager, what's in it for them as an organization as it relates to meeting their organizational objectives and their performance objectives. So for today's video, I just want to talk about those moments where we feel shaken, we're not really sure, we are, immersed, sink or swim into a new situation where we have to really rely on our design skills and really our own ability. When we don't have outside help, not for lack of people trying. My team definitely was trying to give me everything I needed, but because of the time constraints and just the way that things were rolling on this particular project at that particular time, and the client being, holding things kind of close to the vest, which I was forewarned before I was put on the project, it caused things to have to be expedited. So we didn't have a lot of time to talk about, coulda, woulda, shoulda, what ifs. Do you think? I had to say what I needed as a designer, and I had to pull through and design, because go live dates do not change. They're going to go live, and you need to have training so that on that day, when they flip the switch, the employees are ready and they're prepared to be successful. If you found this video, I can't even talk, sorry. If you found this video valuable, please give me a thumbs up, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell so that every time I upload new content, you will be notified. Hey, if you had any times where you felt like you questioned yourself and you came through, put it in the comments. There's a lot of people who think like, I can't do this. You can do it. Or want to know, what do you think? How can I go about doing this where we can all help each other? Remember, we're a community. So I'll see you in my next video.